Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Today with another Runick variation, because I said that I wanted to make more Runick decks, and then I completely stopped after Runick Tindangle because I couldn't come up with anything else where this kind of works and isn't too expensive. Until today, I have come up with something. Yes, it's a tiny bit more expensive than my usual budget decks, but still within the limits, I'd say. And that is Vampire Runick. Hear me out, it does sound strange, and it might be one of the stranger decks that you will run into in the ladder, if even, but it has some synergy, and I want to explain why I feel like this deck might actually be a more playable variant of Vampire than actual vampires. So we start out triple familiar. We have a few issues with these kind of cards, and something that solves these issues in a different way. Usually you want to be playing certain things like Salomon Great Almirash, and you still can. The problem is if you then need to search your Runick field spell, you will have certain issues with this, because you have the issue that you have to summon Hugin into the extra monster zone, and if there's already a linked monster, tough luck, you can't really do that. So your way of getting familiar into the graveyard is mainly Hugin, but also if you summon out Hugin, if for some reason you already drew into Runick Fountain, which can happen, and then you technically don't really need the effect of Hugin, besides the whole protection kind of thing, but you can still then normal summon this card and link it off into a link 2, and then at least you still get the card into the graveyard, but most of the time you hope to get these two into the graveyard with the discard effect of Hugin, which is inherently, like, it's just like a very, very, very nice way of getting your combo started, especially because nowadays you do run quite a big Runick package, because otherwise your Runick plays kind of don't really work out perfectly, and like this, you have basically almost always a way of getting those two into the graveyard. Back in the days, they were stuck in your hand and all kinds sorts of things. You had to jump through hoops to actually get them to the graveyard. Not anymore. Now you just have to make sure, do I have enough vampire cards in the graveyard to be able to send off of this card, and do I have enough Runick cards in my hand to actually get the whole Runick draw engine started? And that's where it sometimes becomes a bit difficult, but usually it does work out. This card searches you stuff, yeah, classic vampire combos. Mainly you want to be searching certain things like Fraulein or Scarlet Scourge, because these are somewhat of your playmakers, but there are other cards that you can run as a search as well. Vampire Retainer, very, very strong card. It searches you mainly your domination, but sometimes you have to search domain because of the second normal summon. It is what it is. Sadly, this variant only runs one domain. Technically, you want to run up to 3, but it would be a bit hard. I'm already struggling on ratios here anyway, so that's a bit of a hard one, and also for the budget aspect, not very great. Fun fact, this card is level 2, this one is level 2. You do the math, Sprite. Technically that is possible. Vampire Ghost, a very, very nice card, somewhat new, I guess, as one of the newer additions to the whole vampire playstyle. This card gets you stuff into your hand, gets you stuff into your graveyard. All you have to do is start with one vampire card in your hand and hope it's not one of the ones that you don't want in the graveyard. Other than that, it is a very good play starter, and also the, well, I don't want to call it synergy, because that's just when you mix two decks together that can both start plays. Sometimes the vampire stuff fetches Ash Blossoms, and then you're kind of more relaxed on the whole Runick stuff, which, you know, you don't want your Runick search, especially if you're playing the budget variant and you only have one fountain, then you don't want that search to be negated, because then you only have one Hugin, and if that card then somewhat doesn't go back into the extra deck because it doesn't get destroyed, or you have to use the effect or something, then you will have a hard time getting into Fountain unless you draw Tip, and so on and so on and so on. So Ash Blossom on the vampire cards can be quite nice, but also vice versa. If you have a way stronger vampire turn, then try to beat out Ash Blossom before with the Runick cards. And like this is like at least some kind of strength to the deck, because Ash Blossom cripples a lot of rogue decks, a lot of budget decks, and with this one it's not as devastating. We do run one Samurai Skull because we don't really have that many normal summons. Well, we have lots of normal summons, but we can normal summon twice the vampire ones, and yeah, this is for the starting normal summon, and then you usually want to go for like the tribute summon that you get either from domain or that you sometimes get from Vampire Ghost, which can be quite nice. So yeah, Vampire Skull can be a play starter for a cheaper variant of Unizombie, but in the end you can substitute this with other cards as well. I decided to run triple Shadow Vampire for like simple reasons. First of all, this is also a play starter, and especially in Runick, you can always tribute Hugin. Yes, you lose the protection, but sometimes that's, yeah, the variant isn't as competent as other Runick variants, so you have to deal with this from time to time, and hope your opponent doesn't really have much spell trap removal. And if you might be able to stop their one spell trap removal that they have with Domination as well, so there's always that. Shadow Vampire cannot attack when this card is normal summoned. You can special summon one Dark Vampire monster from your hand or deck, which is very good because that triggers the effects of Retainer and Familiar, which is a play starter by itself. And then you can still go to Link monsters because this only limits your ability to Xe summon, which is quite nice. And then you have the second phrase, but monsters you control cannot attack for the rest of this turn except that special summon monster. Well, guess what? A lot of the time you have to sacrifice your battle phase anyway with Runics, so it's not as bad as in other Vampire decks where you kind of have to... Your grind game isn't as good as it could be, and with Shadow Vampire then combination with the Runics, it doesn't really matter all that much most of the time. Massive disclaimer here, I say this with probably any Runick deck from now on because in testing it happens so many times. Please click on the battle phase if you want it skipped. You can't just go to end phase and be like, yeah, but I just skipped my battle phase. No, you have to actually click on it and then the game automatically skips the battle phase, because if you don't do this, the next battle phase will then be skipped, and it's just most of the time this will result in a game loss in some kind of way if you don't go for the super stall variant anyway. And it's just sad because you lose out on so much stuff, especially if you don't full on commit to the Runick packet, and sometimes you actually do want to do stuff during your battle phase. Talking about battle phase, Vampire Fraulein, very, very important card, because this card helps you deal with like unaffected monsters, and there are quite a few. There's this Adignister monster that can also pop up with that was a Cyber's Arrival or something. If you don't just play Adignisters, this pops up with like, I think Galaxy Tomahawk can easily go into this with some spell combo and whatnots, and then you want to make sure that you can attack over the 5000. And Punk have like this new extra deck monster that can also be unaffected and have quite a lot of attack points. Annoyingly, or well, can be good for you, is you reduce your own life points, and if your opponent reduces their life points with Punk, the difference between them isn't that big between your life points, so this card can actually help you with that one as well. Vampire Grace in hand 1, it serves two purposes. First of all, it's a level 6 that can revive itself from the graveyard, very, very strong. And, well, for the low price of 2000, can be problematic from time to time, but there is always Scarlet Scourge, which is only 1000 then, woohoo. Secondly, the bleed effect is kind of okay sometimes. If you already know what your opponent is playing, then this can be really nice. And if technically you can send a card then to be summoned by Vampire Sucker, if you want to choose monster, if you want to be brave and want to make your opponent send one free monster, basically free foolish burial for them, which you don't want to do, but technically you can, and that's good. It can help you get a peek at what your opponent is playing, which, yeah, again, there's so many decks that have like trap cards, spell cards, and monster cards that they want to send to the graveyard. Even Spiral has like their trap, for example. If you say trap card, that can be annoying, so it's really not that good, but it helps chipping away at your opponent's deck size, and if you know what you're playing against, then you can kind of get the right cards into the graveyard that kind of hurt your opponent at least, or at least deck thin them a little bit. Vampire Scarlet Scourge, very, very important in this deck because rank 6s are important, and I will get to why that is in a minute, but this one is your access to rank 6ing, because this one is a level 6 and can easily get level 6 out of your graveyard, which you can get into the graveyard with effects like Vampire Desire, for example. Obviously you could play Unizombie, and there's these kind of things, and there's lots of stuff that you can be doing, but for now, for the budgety variant, this is kind of how you have to play your combo, because usually you will be able to get into Retainer somehow, you will be able to get into Desire somehow, and then it's not too hard to actually go into rank 6s as well. Plus there's this neat effect that some of them have of the newish ones, that if this card destroyed a monster by battle, you can summon it from your opponent's graveyard, which can be quite helpful from time to time, but it's more important if you actually run stuff like the zombie vampire. It does work with Dhampir, Vampire Sheridan, but yeah, it does come up sometimes, but not all the time. Vampire Red Baron is for me still an inclusion, because especially if you play grind game, sometimes your opponent won't be aware that you can yoink their monsters, and then if you steal the actually good stuff and trade it out with some nonsense, it can be absolutely amazing, and it is a level 6 that you can easily special summon out of the graveyard with Scarlet Scourge as well, so that's quite nice. If you steal a monster, then this card can also easily go into this one, because if your opponent has a monster with a level, then you can use whatever level it is for this rank 6 one, or if you decide to also play this one, then same for level 8, but then it doesn't work with Red Baron anymore, so there's a bit of that. I decided to run one with Vampire Vamp, one of the cards you could cut for some other kind of stuff if you prefer other things, if you prefer Vampire Sorceress, for example. These two kind of work in conjunction quite well, but I prefer actually keeping the deck space tight, and then this card didn't do all that much. It is what it is. Vampire Vamp can help you decimate your opponent's board, because if it's like once per turn, when this card or a vampire monster is normal summoned to your field, you can target one monster your opponent controls whose attack is higher than this card's. It's a bit annoying because it doesn't say base attack, so every time you equip one monster, you probably will not be able to equip again, usually, because then your opponent has to play like a monster with like crazy attack points if you steal one of theirs already, so it's not too crazy. But this card always comes back as well, so you can use this again and again and again, which in a stall deck, not the worst thing, I guess. Run at your discretion. I kind of like the card, but it doesn't come up as much as I would want it to come up. Vampire Desire, very, very strong card. Can create level 6s, because one thing that some people might miss is it level modulates as well, besides just sending stuff to the graveyard. So it's a play starter or slash extender sometimes, and it also can help you go into rank 6s. One Fountain you probably want to run 2, but you know, budget variant and running out of space, so it is what it is. 2 is probably more optimal. One Domain, technically 2 also, because you do run quite low on life points, and sometimes you need this like extra life gain, especially if you want to defend with Fraulein. That can be quite helpful then. But yeah, you mainly need it at 1 to search and then get the double normal summon. Runick Tip, don't think I have to say much to that. 1 free banish and search, so this card is very nice. Adds another draw to your Runick Fountain draw, so that's nice. Searches Runick Fountain, very, very strong card. Flashing Fire, this time at 3, because you kind of do need to knuckle down on the whole Runick stuff, otherwise it's kind of useless if you don't run the full removal that they have at their disposal. It's a decent card at least, I'd say. Destruction, same thing. Freezing Curses, same thing. Slumber, good for stalling, can use it on your own turn, so that's quite good if you want to trigger Fountain. Smiting Storm, yeah, you can fit the ratios like you want with like Dispelling and Smiting Storm. I felt like Smiting Storm was more useful because you can actually choose how many cards you want to banish, so you can vary if you have another Runick card that you want to use, and you can't use them if your opponent doesn't have that many cards in deck anymore to banish them, then you can make sure they have exactly the amount and then knock them down a bit. It's not just all cards on the field, you can actually basically decide, which is quite nice because it says up to, so something that some people might not have noticed. Dispelling can be quite nice. It's okay, it gives you a draw, like run at your discretion, like the numbers of these two in comparison. 1 Domination gives you life points back if you negate monster effects, yay, super good. Well, at least if they were on board, then that's nice. And other than that, spell trap cards can be very annoying if you don't have much else that you can deal with it besides obviously destroying them, but not negate. So 1 Domination is definitely something you have to run in this specific variant. Searches you, protects, discard, very, very nice card. This card can add you your Fountain back if you mill it by accident, or if you actually get it destroyed, then this card can get it back. Plus, this card also is, well, it's a good stall monster and sometimes can be tribute fodder. Sadly, they don't have a Runick card that actually isn't an ultra rare or super rare, but it is what it is. You could run Moonin just because of the whole gain 1000 life points, can be very helpful in this deck, especially if you storm. Shark Fortress, because this card is a dark rank 5 monster, so you can go into it with the Vampire plus Fraulein if you ever want to, just a thing, or technically with 2 Shadow Vampires. But you can summon this one, so mainly it would be out of this combo, out of this one. You can run the other Vampire that is level 5, that is basically somewhat the same effect as Scarlet Scourge. I decided not to because I do want to go more into the rank 5s, which I'll be talking about in a second, but you can vary. This one, Force Focus, is somewhat of a negate, sometimes that can be helpful. Yeah, it's not great, but you know what it is. Shogi Rook, actually a card that helps you get rid of your opponent's nasty back row stuff. And now we're at the big playmaker of the deck. Very risky at the moment, but it's a card that would enable you technically to run stuff like the yugioh and things to even further knuckle down on the whole mill concept. So this card can be actually quite fun if you mill your own kind of stuff, because this card, the attack gain doesn't really matter, but can come in handy if you're playing against an opponent's dark deck. But this card, you can detach 1 Xyz material, and each player sends the top 5 cards from their deck to the graveyard, which is quite nice. Or the entire deck if it's less than 5, that's also somewhat important at sometimes. You don't have to run it at 3, I just dumped some stuff in here because there was not much else that you can be, like not much else cheap stuff at least, that you can be playing. And sometimes you can get it off 2 or 3 times, especially with the stalling of the Runick package. Doesn't really, like, you can cut it down to 2 if you feel like you want to put in other stuff. But yeah, can be risky these days with milling this, but still, it is a nice thing to do. And it's a dark monster and it's a zombie, sometimes that matters as well. This card just very good in general in vampires, gets rid of certain stuff. You can summon stuff back from your graveyard and so on and so on and so on. So there is applications, and in the end it is a vampire deck, so I would want to run it. And 1 Dragonlark Pairen, because this card can help you stall as well, funny enough. It cannot be a strike battle card effect while a monster other than this one is face up on the field. Now special summon from the graveyard, which you have lots of stuff because you play vampires. It can't even be from your opponent's graveyard, it doesn't say from your graveyard, so that's quite fun. And so it works with Vampire Sucker as well if your opponent doesn't have a way of getting rid of some of the monsters that you summon to their field, which is quite funny, because it doesn't say on your face-up field, but just on the field. So that is interesting at least. And during the standby phase, you can detach 1 material, so you can do this twice and target 1 level 5 or lower monster in your graveyard and special summon it. Trigger is technically Familiar or Retainer, and you can also get your Vampire or your Fraulein back, which can be quite helpful. So this card definitely has uses, and for rank 6 it has some okay attack value, I'd say. Vampire Sucker draws, technically helps you tribute over your opponent's monsters, very very strong card. Budget card, run good stuff if you want. Fascinator is okay, Access Decode Talker is obviously good, and so on. There's plenty of good link cards that you can be running instead if you have them. And some cards to talk about, obviously Vampire Voivode and the rank 8 one that also mills 4 cards, which is quite nice as well. Would be a nice inclusion if you want to go for it. If not, yeah, it is what it is. It's a bit expensive, but if you already have the Vampire package anyway, might find a way to include it with getting rid of Vampire Vamp possibly, and then running this one in the extra deck as well for one of them, for example, and you should be fine. Called by the Grave, Cosmic Cyclone, cards that you might want against certain decks, but it is what it is. In the end, you will see what you play against most and how you can edit your deck accordingly to the meta that you're running against. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile, and onwards to the replays. And the power of editing brings us to the next replay, which is where I kind of want to show off. I don't know what to call this segment, but it's meant to show off what the deck can do. And usually the replays won't be like too high quality. They'll just I pick the replays that fits best for explaining how you can play this kind of deck. And yeah, sometimes that might not be against the best opponent, but it at least shows the strengths and weaknesses of the deck, and I'll be talking about them in general. So what we do here is we look at our hand. We have 1 Runick card. Is usually not quite good enough, because you usually want to have like at least 1 card that gets another card that gets you the +2 if you actually get your field spell. So what I was thinking is maybe use the Runick engine now, possibly beta an Ash Blossom on the whole Runick search, which can be dangerous because then you only have 3 Runick Tip to actually search your Runick field spell, and this can be problematic. But at heart, this deck is still a vampire deck, and it has still some of the qualities that vampires have. You could still set up 1 Omni Negate. You can still set up some battle protection at least, so it's not terrible if that gets negated, because in the end, if something gets Ash Blossom, most rogue decks and budget decks crumble under this anyway. So we'll see. The best possible scenario would be they don't have Ash Blossom, which spoiler, they don't, but in that case it would have been better if they just Ash Hugin, because we still have this card then as tribute fodder, and then at least the vampire combos go through, if you can call it combos. I mean, they do actually summon quite a lot for the fact that the deck is subpar at best. So we discard the 1 card that actually does stuff in the graveyard, which is Vampire Grace. We don't really need it in our hand anyway, and we add our Fountain. which we cannot do much with at the moment, obviously, but from now on I think it's pretty straightforward. We go into Vampire Ghost, get a Vampire play started, don't need another Ghost in my hand. Usually once you get one Ghost off, this cycle of your resources keep on going, so you don't really need the second one. Plus Ghost has the neat effect that you can banish it from the graveyard and then actually doing the main phase quick play tribute summon one of your monsters, which is quite nice. So if I have this in the graveyard and I some reason don't have a way of getting another card into the graveyard, I can at least still get Shadow Vampire off, so that's quite neat. Or like the one that I had. So we summon out Retainer here, because Retainer searches the counter trap, and surprise surprise, we have 2 level 2s, so you know what that means. No, we're not starting any Spite combos here, even though technically if you have the extra deck for it you could. We actually get Hugin out of the extra monster zone, which is a dangerous game to play, because obviously Hugin is somewhat of your protection actually, but we do need the extra monster zone, because I've had an idea. I've had the thought, if I go into my Vampire Sucker right now, then technically it's possible, because I run quite a high count of Runick cards in this specific variant, it's possible that I draw into another Runick card, and then hopefully it's a disruptive one, so I can actually use it during my opponent's turn. And even if it's not, I can at least play it most of the time, and actually get 2 draws from it, and then hopefully draw another disruption. Then I would be at 2 disruptions, which is usually quite alright. So what we do here is we search our battle protection, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, actually we go into Red Baron, because we have to use another discard, but that is okay. It doesn't really overly matter that much in that moment anyway. It's mainly because like I wanted to not discard Scarlet Scourge, so I have like play in the next turn. But technically what you could have done here is also you could have not searched Red Baron but searched Fraulein, and then just discarded Scarlet Scourge, which, you know, then you lack certain stuff during the next turn, but also a thing, so you would have the battle protection here, which we do not have. And now we waste even more resources. We get Red Baron to the graveyard, which doesn't do much at the moment, but next turn in combination with Scarlet Scourge, this could be quite a neat play. But we do this so we can get 1 draw of Vampire Sucker, because we have searched quite a lot of deck thinning has happened, so we hope we can draw into 1 Runick spell, and we did. Sadly not one of the ones that you really want to be seeing, just one of the ones that, like, yeah, they do alright. Most decks search these days, that's why Ash Blossom is such a good card. Well, besides the fact special summoning from deck is also a thing. So it's not terrible, so we can actually use our Runick package as well. We use the Fountain then. We have some form of protection on Fountain with Vampire Domination, and we pass the turn, which, granted, this doesn't look like much, but keep in mind this is vampires. Their turn 1 boards, unless you play some crazy control zombie vampire thing with like lots of floodgates, which you can do with basically any archetype that has only certain types of monsters or whatever, so it's not really something special. They're not like crazy anyway, so this is fairly okay. You have enough chump blockers. If they don't go into Utopia double, then you should be fine. Even if they do, you at least have this one. You have the chance of getting 2 more Runick spells off of this one, so this isn't too bad. And you have a follow-up play if you actually at least end with 1 monster on board, possibly. So it's not terrible. I see that they want to be starting their plays, and I see they play a 60 card deck. They still have a full hand. They did send their Tracer to the graveyard without actually using the effect, so they kind of bank on getting this card back, possibly with the field spell, even though it's a bit of a weird play. I don't know what their hand looks like. Obviously, sadly, you can't make their hand visible, I think. But I thought if not hit them here, then there's not much. I mean, I could hit the field spell, so they at least search it out of the deck, and then it's gone. That would have been a thing. But then they still have 1 monster on board, and then if they have stuff that they could special summon from hand, they could easily go into Link 2, and then Dragon's Ravine is a thing, and technically then they would search a card, but yeah, I didn't want to chance it, so I thought, why not disrupt them here, and hopefully they don't have much else. And also I thought Dragon Link searches a lot anyways, even if I disrupt them here, there will be more searches, so I could still possibly draw into some Runick stuff here. And in the end, they didn't have more. Must have like not had the best starting hand, although like Tracer Normal Summon usually is quite good, and I would have actually drawn into another Runick card. So the whole theory behind this kind of worked out. I'm not saying this is crazy smart to do it that way, but technically, you know, you have to play the hand to the best of your ability, and I feel like that was once in my life, I feel like that was actually quite alright. So what we have to do here is we start more of a combos, because we cannot cycle the whole counter trap again, because we do not have another counter trap in deck, and vampires don't really have a way of recurring spell traps from your graveyard, so this is a bit where the vampire engine becomes more of a stall and attack engine rather than actually doing anything disruptive. We get vampire grace back, and mainly I knew this would be problematic because at this point I only realized they had 60 cards. Before I was not aware of it. I didn't pay too much attention, and testing usually is just trying to figure out if the deck actually works. So trying to figure out what they do, I wanted to mill their deck a bit, bleed their deck a bit, and see if they actually have trap cards in the deck. So I called trap card. They did not have any, so yeah, no trap card has been sent to the graveyard. And then I went into Pilgrim Reaper because I kind of thought if I want to get my Runick engine fully going, I need to mill some Runick spells and possibly even get a draw during my turn now. That would have been amazing. Sadly, it's not like this because with these two cards I can't anyway. So that was a bit off. But this is the card that you want to go into kind of if your opponent plays the 40 card deck, and then you can actually, with the Runick stuff and with milling 5, although right now at the moment meta wise this can be very dangerous, especially if 2 elements also will be added into the mix. What you could have done is going into this one just for stall reasons. You could have gone into this one if you get your full package, if you full Runick stuff off, then things will be sent to the graveyard and they could summon stuff back with this one, so it's not too bad either. Other than that, I think technically you could have gone into this one as a disruption as well, considering that they do play Dragonlink, so there will some level 5 or higher effect monsters that you might want to negate, but also lots of link stuff, so I didn't feel like it was necessary. Also, I was really buzzing trying out this card, if this actually does much. Like I said, it was in testing, but yeah, that's usually what you want to be doing in the whole stall and mill kind of game. But obviously there are other options. We mill one familiar, which is quite good, so we get this card to the graveyard, get another Surge, deck thin, get our battle protection now, which is quite nice, and we end here. Technically, if you run a better extra deck, you could go into stuff like Appaloosa here, because now we don't have the counter trap. With my extra deck, there was nothing really that I could go into that's even better than what I have anyway on board. But obviously if you play good Link 3s, Link 2s, the whole IP Masquerena thing is a thing, then you want to be doing this. I did, I don't want to say preemptively, because I was hoping to actually draw into Runick Tip or one of the other 2 Runick cards that actually do stuff during your opponent's turn, and hopefully banish some stuff that they might need. I did not want to get this to go through, because I kind of remembered they still had like somewhat of a bricky hand, so I thought if I get rid of this now, then it might be fine, but they still might have a normal summon, so it might not have been the best option anyway. We can, yeah, you can argue if that was good or not, the last place, but this is mainly a showcase, so if you play the deck, just, I don't know, play better, I guess. And we draw, and sadly we draw into 2 more Flashing Fires. That's always the issue that we might have. But with Fraulein, usually they shouldn't OTK you here. Obviously everything is possible, and after all, it is just Vampire, so it's not amazing, and Runick did get nerfed by the ban list, so we have not all that much. They did Surge, so we did get to use Dispelling just in general to reduce the hand size, because I knew I had stuff to trigger the Runick effects during my turn, so that wasn't too problematic either. We got our card flipped, and yeah, they had only a Fairy Tale Snow as a normal summon monster, so who lucked out in that one? I knew they couldn't beat over by battle, so this was fine, and that's when they concede. Not because, like, I don't know, technically this would have turned into a very, very grindy game, very annoying. I could have stolen their monsters with stuff, got stuff back from their graveyard. Like, vampires can be very exhausting to play against already, not because they're very good, but because they're annoying in a sense. And with Runick in comparison, it's even more annoying when you mix those 2 together. So maybe the person didn't want to sit through all of this, but you see, like, the deck works, it does stuff, and it does stuff at least as well as pure vampires or zombie vampires, I feel. Sometimes it's a bit better, sometimes it's a bit more vulnerable, a bit worse. Try it out if you have the cards. It's quite fun if you want to play vampire. You will get lots of surrenders as well from people just don't want to sit to the Runicks and just think like, oh shit, this is a Runick deck, I don't have an out to the whole Runick stuff right now, so I'll just not do it. You can upgrade the deck as much as you like, and there's some potential in this that I haven't, like, you can't fully grasp with a budget variant. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile and the replay. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, hope you have a good day.